Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Communities Housing and Environment Committee meeting for the 16th of December 2019. And the clock's on time as well, which makes a change. I've been advised that there'll be no fire drills this evening, planned this evening, but if the alarm sounds, Ryan to my right will assess the situation and provide further instructions, evacuation of the building if necessary. I would remind you that the meeting will be broadcast live on YouTube and recorded for playback and on the Maidstone Borough Council website. But will anybody else be recording this evening? No, we don't have Councillor Mackay with us this evening, which is noted. Thank you. I asked this of people who are knowing at the meeting that this may be happening. Members using mobile phones or tablets are asked to please ensure that these are on silent and only used for business this evening. Thank you. So the first item, we go for apologies for absence, please.
We've received apologies from Councillors Kadka and Powell.
Councillor.
Sorry, Chairman. Dinesh Kadka has sent his apologies. He's on holiday now. Oh.
He just said it, yeah. It's okay, don't, thank you. Please, some things are best done twice, so thank you. Notification of substitute members, please.
Councillor Commence for Councillor Kadka.
Super, thank you very much. Notification, oh sorry, beg your pardon, urgent items. Item 15 was inadvertently uploaded onto the agenda. We will not be having it this evening, as we actually did have it back in June, and it was an error at the time, so we won't be having item 15 this evening. Is that all okay, everybody? Yeah. Thank you. Item 4, notification of visiting members. Could you come to the microphone, please, and your name and what you're here
Chair.
for?
Councillor Atkinson, in respect of item 13, local nature reserves. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Councillor Vizard, and I believe you want me to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Right. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? Mrs. Rose?
I'm not sure if you call this lobbying, but it's a follow-up on the question and answer session that we had last meeting.
Sorry, this is disclosures now we're doing. Lobbying is the next item.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, it's all right.
I thought you said lobbying. Sorry, okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, so there's none of that, no disclosures. So we go to disclosures of lobbying.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, a follow-up on the question and answer session we have, member of the public, on item 10 about the policy of pets and homeless accommodation.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much. Nobody else been lobbied? No, thank you. To consider whether only be items taken in private because of possible disclosure exempt information. We don't have any yellow pages or part 2 this evening. So we go on to the minutes of the 12th of November, which is on page 1. I think on page 2. Page 3, page 4, 5. Oh, okay.
Sorry, Chairman. Just reading through it, might be my memory, but for disclosures of lobbying on page 2 regarding the GP provision surgery, I thought that was me that put my hand up for that one, rather than Councillor Rose.
Sorry, could you just tell us where you are? What page you're on? Page 2?
Page 2, yeah.
Right,
so the disclosures of lobbying.
Yep.
Pretty sure that wasn't yourself, was it? No, it was me. It was D Rose, not M
Right,
Rose.
okay. We get that changed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cheers. Yeah. Okay, what page did I get up to? Was it page 5, page 6? Where was I? Page 6, page 7. Page 8. And page 9. So that's okay, and we'll make that change to that member's name in the meetings, and I'll sign them. Is that agreed? Agreed? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Item 9, presentation of petitions. We have none this evening. Questions, answer session from members of the public. We do have none. We don't have any this evening from the public. However, I will sort of mention it now because regarding the item about Miss Bonnet last week, and I've spoken to officers yesterday, and not yesterday, it's today's Monday, I've got to get it Friday, and the outreach team and the homelessness team are actually considering how we're going to deal with this at the moment. We hope to get a response fairly soon because it's how can I say, fairly unique, and Maidstone will be one of the first to try and implement this, but they have to look at all scenarios. So, but I have chased it up, so that's regarding that question. And I have gone back to Miss Bonnet as well. Mrs. Rose.
Yes, as you have, and as I think Mr Littlemore and Councillor Mackay have both been emailed by Mrs Bonnet, just to remind us of what actually happened. The gentleman was rehoused and was not able to take his pets, which I think were 2 dogs and a cat, to his new accommodation. This happened in the summertime, in June, July time, and 10 days after he had entered his accommodation, he was found after committing suicide, and it's considered that he sadly ended his life because of the situation of not being able to take his pets. Mrs Bonnet is very concerned about this whole situation. As you know, Chair, she has emailed you as well as myself. She is seeking support. She's had a letter from actually Florida in the USA agreeing with her. So this is not unnecessarily, well, it's not a problem that we share only in this country, but in other places. She's being supported by a registered charity called Street Paws, which I believe is a charity which supports homeless people looking after their animals. It's also been on KM Online, and Mrs Bonnet has set up a petition and had 13,000 signatures to her petition. I think possibly it has been mentioned, and may I raise this, that the situation is that if a person is offered accommodation, if they refuse, they go back to the end of the waiting list. It is thought possibly would be more compassionate if the situation could be made that if someone is in that situation who is a homeless person and possibly a vulnerable person, and their pet means so much to them, as I think we can understand sometimes, you know, the pets do mean a great deal to people, that possibly in compassion, Maidstone Borough can look at the situation and allow the person to stay in temporary accommodation until a suitable accommodation which doesn't have a no pets policy that accommodation can be offered to them. I know myself that I'm a tenant from Hyde Housing Association, and I know that association does actually allow pets, but obviously, as I say, some associations and some places do not allow pets. So I think it would be a compassionate thing if, instead of refusing accommodation because it's no pets and being put at the back of the queue, someone in that situation could actually be kept in temporary accommodation until a suitable accommodation is found.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with your direction of travel personally, and I think the majority of us are as well from the last meeting we had. As I said, once we've got some heads of terms, if I can put it like that, on a way forward, perhaps it'd be a good idea if those of us that have been involved, and Miss Bonnet, we can get together to iron something out to move forward. I know as I've been a councillor long enough to say things don't happen overnight, but it's something that we have to do, and we don't particularly want any loopholes in it because, as you say, you've got different scenarios, different people's situations, and we don't want to say, oh, we can do XXX, but we can't do Y, if you know what I mean. So we have to encompass all of it. But thank you very much for your input. Thank you. Okay, we go on to item 11, the committee work Oh, sorry, Councillor Joy.
Just before we move on, I'm looking in my minutes, and probably I should have done it under the minutes. But just wanted to say, those of you may or may not know, I didn't make the meeting last time, which is very unusual for me to miss a meeting. And I must say, I was very disappointed to learn that the meeting had been changed. So we should have had the meeting, I think, last week, but it was changed because of the election. I don't think all people realise that when we have these dates in our diary, they've been in our diary a long time. Councillor Cadker would have been at that meeting, and this is his committee. I do appreciate that the elections was something we weren't expecting, but I still want to show my disappointment at the committee that they've just gone ahead and decided to do it without any other thought other than the elections, because I've now missed another meeting that I should be at tonight to be here. So it was really just to raise the point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I mean, I sort of come from that point of view as well, because I voted against it at the time, and I think if I can speak for Councillor Powell, who isn't here tonight, and that's the same reason as well. So we were doing different, we were tied up, but we're making notes of that. And as you say, it was in the diary for a year, and it's very difficult. Okay, thank you. Right, we will move on now to the committee work programme, item 11. The mobiles, I can update you that the mobile CCTV item has been moved to February now off of that. I've spoken to officers. A report was written, however, things have changed very recently and they want to get it as robust as possible going forward because there's different scenarios surrounding the mobile camera situation. So that's that. And also I can inform members that do you remember the Bedgebury takeaway outlet that was on the work programme? That's no longer going to be, we're not going to be seeing that. It may come back again next year at some stage, but it has actually been taken out. So, Councillor Joy.
Disappointed again about the CCTV. A question. When was the last time we had any information come through about CCTV? Does anyone remember? Because I don't.
Yeah.
If I may, it's a little bit of a stab, Councillor Mrs. Joy, but I think it was June time. It was shortly after the last election, from memory.
If I remember rightly, that wasn't to do with particularly the mobiles. That was the actual agreeing, moving the equipment up to, which is now taking place. And there's various issues regarding cabling at Maidstone House and legal matters that slowed that up, as I understand it.
I do appreciate that, but I do think that's been a long time for us as a committee that's supposed to be looking at it, and we can say absolutely nothing because we haven't had any input.
Would you, although we have mobile CCTV in February, would you like me to ask for a more fuller report on the actual progress of the CCTV in town as a whole?
I think a report
We'll
would
be
be
doing
wonderful.
that anyway, I've just been told, but yeah, okay. Right, thank you. Kimmins, yep.
Yeah, have we got any CCTV in the town?
Sorry?
Do we have any CCTV in the town?
Oh yes, most definitely. I think, I mean, I'm going to guess here, but I believe we've got around about 30 cameras in the town area.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I can drop round some notes in the next few days, if you like, in terms of where we are with the sort of moving from one sort of system to the new one, and give people a feel for where we are on that process. So I can do that in the next few days.
What will bother me is one finishing and then a gap before the new one starts, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of this committee work programme, I notice we've still got advertising and selling of pesticides down as a sort of floating item. I think we discussed this about a month ago and agreed that unfortunately there was nothing that the council could do, this council could do about it, and it was more of a county or HSE matter. Two items that I don't see on the programme. The first is that apparently, according to the minutes, we resolved at the last meeting that a report on GP provision would be produced for the January committee meeting. I don't see that on here. And secondly, I remember, I think I sort of seconded it or something. Councillor Mrs Rose had raised the matter of firework safety and the impact on animals. And I think it was generally agreed that we'd add that to the work programme, but again, I don't see it here.
Yeah. I mean, from my point of view, the GP provision is definitely missing. It should be on there. And but I know there's an update coming soon, but because you were the instigator of that question.
It's not tied up.
No, it's not. I've just been talking about it's the local care hubs, which is sort of like runs alongside that, but I believe that is a completely separate item altogether. Yeah. We'll make a note of those.
In January, there's also a report on fees and charges, which will be twinned with the budget proposals. So that will be added to the work programme. And although also the GP provision's just been mooted for January, even if it's only those two items, the budget proposals and the fees and charges, and the meeting still needs to be held in order to meet the timetable for getting those items through.
Thank you, Ryan. Cheers. So is everybody... Oh, Mrs Rose?
I did actually mention to you, Chair, the possibility of inviting Maidstone Mediation to come along and speak to us about their work. It would be very helpful for them to do that. And I was very encouraged by their 30-year AGM a few weeks ago when Mayor Marion Ring came along and also gave such a really positive thumbs up for the help that mediation had actually given her. So that was something that I think that would be good just to hear about the work of Maidstone Mediation.
Okay. Thank you. I am aware that Mrs Matthews has contacted mediation people. I think it's about 3 or 4 times now, but we haven't got a date confirmed either way with them. It's not for a lack of trying, basically.
Just as long as it's on, that would be good. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. And I'm aware that Maidstone Mediation is recognised nationally as well about all the good work they do, because I hear it at other places, so you're quite right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if we may just really briefly have a little bit of a rundown on what the progress is on some of these TBC items and where they might be likely to fall in a speculative sense. And the reason I ask is because I think on albeit only 3 fairly short years of sitting on this committee, I don't remember ever seeing so many one agenda item meetings being potentially in our near future. So it'd be really nice to have a bit of understanding of where some of those TBC items might fall.
I can contact the officers responsible for those reports and we can circulate something outside the meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Connell.
Thank you. Just to add, in terms of the Affordable Housing Supplementary Planning Guidance document, that has been out to consultation, so it is sort of moving along, but I would imagine that's going to be early in the next financial year, but good progress is being made on that one.
Okay, so we will, regarding the amendments and suggestions and comments, we agree to the work programme as it is at the moment. Okay, and then we'll add everything else on board. Okay, thank you. Right, now we're going to item 12, and a presentation by Councillor Vizard on Age UK, please, Councillor. And thank you very much for coming along this evening. And I believe Councillor Vizard has agreed to take questions after his short presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members and officers. Please excuse me if I repeat myself a few times, but where the work that we do, it sort of rolls over into different areas, so I will probably be a little bit repetitive, but where I started, I got invited along to Age UK many years ago by 2 friends to have a look at and see what Age UK did. And a month after they were there, they walked away and left me in the driving seat, so to speak. But after all these years, I've been a chairman down there for many years, but that's by the by. I'm also making a little bit of a plug for outside bodies because we have got a vacancy on there, so if there's anybody out there would like to come and look and see what we do, you'd be very welcome. And at the moment, there's myself as one of the councillors. We've also got 2 other councillors, Malcolm Mackay and Martin Round. They're not there as outside bodies. They're in there, they're attending in their own rights because they are very dedicated to providing services for the older people out there. But I'll just move on to, as probably the interesting that you're showing is the activities that we provide. Probably people look at where we were a few years ago as Age Concern, and they probably thought Age Concern, it's where we take a lot of old people to day centres and we keep them at a day centre for a day, we feed them, water them, and then we take them home. That may have been the concept that there was many years ago, but it's far from the services that we provide now. I'll leave this pamphlet with you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just quickly go through the services that we do provide. We provide independent living service. That's for older people that are in their own homes, to keep them in their own homes rather than be, I'm not going to say a burden, but a burden on the state, where they're being looked after in care or something like that. By maintaining people in their own homes, it's good for their own well-being, and that's where they would sooner be rather than be locked away in some institute somewhere. We also have a foot care service, and our foot care provider that we've got in our offices, he's gone beyond the stage of just doing foot care. He's actually accredited to be able to deal with people for dealing with their feet with diabetes, which a lot of foot care agencies can't do, but our service is there for that. And we provide a bathing service, and the bathing service is obviously at people's homes. We would go in once or twice a week to provide this bathing service there. and where I originally started with the daycare. Daycare, we drive around Maidstone, we collect clients, we take them to 5-day centres that we run in Maidstone, and they arrive at 10 o'clock at the day centres. They have food, entertainment, and just general conversation, which is obviously helping them in their situations rather than being left as lonely people in their own houses. And we also take them, from there we take them home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're at our day centres for 5 hours a day. Goodman Centre, dedicated dementia centre that we run in Maidstone. There's a lot of the Age UKs do not provide this service, but we in Maidstone, we're fortunate. We have our own dedicated centre that we run. It's in a bungalow in Bearsted. It's to provide what is really felt to be, rather than institutionalised, it's in a home environment. And obviously being in a bungalow, the environment is there. COGS Club, cognitive stimulation therapy. It's obviously the people experiencing memory loss. We run this as in Maginford once a week, so people could just go up and attend and be there. We also have chair-based fitness again at Maginford, so if people want to go there, that's a useful activity for them. But people are less mobile, but they can get a little bit of fitness. We run a handyman service, so there's a lot of elderly people out there that may want a shelf put up, they may want a room decorated. We would do anything from putting a shelf up, hanging curtains, to redecorating. It's another service that we provide. And obviously through the summer, we provide a gardening service. And much the same as the independent living service, but we've got dedicated gardeners that go out there and look after gardens for elderly people. We run an information and advice service. The information and advice service is for, this is being repetitive now, where we've got people that are carers that may be using people that are using the dementia centre or other facilities that are not actually claiming their full rights that they're entitled to. Well, our young lady that we've got in there, she's been with us for about 9 months and she's done very well. I'll give you some figures later on of these where we are. And the befriending service, it's another activity that we run, which is primarily run by volunteers, but we also have cafes that people can attend. We have other meeting places. We have Arriva have signed on to it. We'd have it with a talking bus, so that there's again all those sort of that facility out for them. In Mill Street, we actually run computer and tablet services. So if you've got an older person that is not computer literate, or they want to, if people buy them, people may buy the elderly people tablets for their Christmas to keep in touch with their family. We will take them in there and we will teach them anything from turning a computer on and turning it off to actually being fully conversant with computer use. So again, that's a service we provide. We also provide from Mill Street, we provide wheelchair hire. So if there's anybody that's out there that actually needs to get around the town, we can provide a wheelchair hire. Basic rundown of our services. Volunteering is another thing that we run. And the volunteering again is where it's being repetitive again. We've got day centres. We always need helpers in the day centres so people can volunteer to work in the day centres with our elderly people and be part of providing this service. We also need minibus drivers. We run a fleet of minibuses around the the town for collecting our old people or collecting people for the dementia centre. We need drivers for it. We need minibus escorts, which again is people that volunteer to. We're the only Age UK that actually insists that we have our volunteers on the buses with the people that we've got on there, because if the driver's driving, we don't actually want to be the vulnerable people to be possibly inconvenienced. Dementia Centre help us. Again, as I spoke about the Goodman Centre, we always want people to work in there with us. And the befriending service, that is primarily run by volunteers. We have got one member of staff and another member of staff that's part-time that run this service. But we have got, I think we're running about 90 volunteers out there that are actually befriending people in the community. And obviously the computers, I said about the computers, we've got, we need tutors in there to help us out with that. So we do an awful lot of activities for volunteers if there's people wants to take up those. The social activities. This is basically the befriending service that we run. The befriending, they meet in Harper's in the town on a Monday, and there's about 20 or 30 people meet in there, and they have tea and coffee, they sit and talk, so they're actually being involved. They're not lonely in their own houses, they're actually out there meeting friends. The chair-based fitness is, again, it was the people that are a little bit less mobile, they can go in and do chair-based fitness. Saks Hair Academy, they've teamed up with Age UK Maidstone and the West Kent Befriending Service, and they offer hairdressing and a chat. So it's another service that's going on. We've also got one of the other areas where there's another cafe that actually has a befriending area in there. And the talking bus, as I said earlier, Arriva have signed up to that, and they arrange outings for people to go out and visit different areas and actually just sit and talk and mix, and it breaks down this loneliness. I'll move on to probably the uninteresting part now, just some figures. When I said about our information and advice service, our young lady that's there working for us, she's been working for us for about 9 months now, and she has managed to raise for people that are not claiming their correct benefits or anything else, or benefits for helping with social care or anything like that. She's actually managed to get £665,000 in for directly to the people that are dependent on these benefits that they should be receiving. And I said earlier, the befriending service.
Sorry, can I just stop you there? What was that figure again, please?
£665,000.
Right, thank you.
An awful lot of money, Derek. An awful lot of money. Which is what people have not been claiming, or what they're entitled to claim. The befriending service, it's got 96 clients are supported. There are 96 clients that are being supported in their own homes, where our volunteers are going out and meeting them in their own homes and sitting down and talking to them for a couple of hours or a morning. The community cafes, which I said about earlier, during the week, there's 126 clients go into there every month. Again, part of the befriending service. The computer classes, I said to you before, we actually run that in Mill Street, and that again is a free service. Those 4 services that I spoke of there are totally free to the recipients. There's no charge to it at all. The charge services that we've got is the daycare centres. We have 146 clients a week attend day centres, and that charges £14.20 a day. And we provide the transport for them to be there as well. The bathing service is £15.20, and if you have a second bath in the same week, again it's reduced. It's reduced down to about £13. So a reasonable rate. The Goodman Centre, which is obviously one of the biggest ones, is £52 per day, and that actually gives the carers that are looking after people with dementia, it actually gives them their respite that they require. And this is where a lot of this money that our information and advice young lady that we've got has actually raised the money, or she's got the benefits that they're entitled to allow the people to attend the Goodman Centre. So that's where a lot of that's gone. The Cogs Club, which was £20, which was obviously a session there. Chair-based fitness is £3, anyone can turn up for that. Foot care is £20 for if you go into our Mill Street office, but our gentleman actually does the foot care. He does home visits as well, and the foot care, I think, is a home visit, is £26. If there's two of you, if it's a husband and wife together, instead of the £50-odd, it would be £43 for two people to be in there. The independent living service is £16.50 an hour. Handyman service, £27.50 an hour, and £22 for any further hours after that, or £150 a day. And the gardening service, much the same, £16.50 an hour. We also provide a home from hospital service. This is via the CCGs, where our independent living girls that work on our, I say girls on our independent living, there are only ladies that do our independent living. We haven't got any gentlemen that actually do it, which is a pity really, because there's an opportunity for men to be out there on the independent, working out there. And we're contracted to provide this service for over 55s every day during the week. So when a person gets discharged from the hospital in the afternoon, one of our girls will go up there, drive them home, they will take them into their house, settle them in, make sure they've got milk, tea and coffees or whatever they need before they actually leave them. And they also arrange for anyone to call to make sure if they need any equipment in the house, bathing equipment or lifting equipment or anything like that. So they will always arrange that to make sure that happens at the same time. So, and obviously the biggest thing that we do is our volunteering. So a quick overview for you, Mr. Chairman, and I will take questions if anyone's got any.
Thank you, Brian. It's very interesting, yeah. I expect there's some questions coming up. I looked over there first. You first, Councillor Burton, was it your hand? Councillor Rose, sorry, I saw a hand go up on that side. Okay.
Just quickly, thank you very much for that. It was very interesting. Just a quick one, kind of within roughly my purview. You said you work with a hair salon to provide linked up services. Just two questions. Which hair salon was it? And did you provide the training, or was there any training involved with that hair salon staff around that? It's something I do a similar thing with in my day job.
I don't know, because it's one of the things that was organised through our CEO, but it's actually Saks Hair Academy. I'll leave this for you, so if you want to check it up later, Councillor Rose, you're quite welcome to have a look at it.
Cool. So what is this? Yeah, that's right. So you're saying it says someone else within the organisation that organises that part of it for Saks? Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joy.
Thank you. I learned a lot. I thought I knew quite a lot, but it's encouraging to know that it's progressing. And volunteers, any organisation that haven't got the volunteers, it would come to a standstill. I truly believe that. you mentioned volunteers that are working within the day centres and stuff. My ears pricked up when you spoke about home visits. I'm assuming all these volunteers that you, and I don't know how many you have, but I'm assuming they would be DBS checked and whatever before they go into vulnerable people's homes. That's it. Oh, sorry.
No, next part over.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor Joy. Every one of our volunteers that we've got about 160 volunteers out there working with us, and every one of them is DBS checked. We've got nobody that actually works within the organisation that's not DBS checked, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Can I come back? Just to say that's encouraging to hear you say that, because there's lots of volunteers now. When you mention DBS checks, they go, oh, it's too much trouble and all the rest of it. Well, it isn't, and I agree 100%. So if people are listening out there that want to help and become a volunteer, I think that's an important thing to get across. Thanks.
Mrs Rose.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Vizard. I had absolutely no idea that Age Concern did so much. I am a little troubled because I do realise that the prices you charge stack up well against actually commercially outside prices, but I am thinking that they are a little bit high. I mean, I'm very pleased that your benefits advisor is able to gain the money that will help to pay some of these prices. But I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the financial situation and how Age UK stands in that situation.
Thank you. Yes, our prices there, we've sort of kept the prices where we are at this level. We've had to put a small increase on this year. The big problem that we've got is like a lot of organisations, and you're one of the organisations that I'm with, Mrs Rose, as well. And obviously we know what the funding's like. The funding has been reduced from the sort of central quarter. I suppose it's provided funding for a lot of Age UKs and Age Concerns. In Maidstone, we are 60% self-funding, and we are only 40% really in the area of grant funding. So we actually try and run the service, because if the grant funding dries up, we still want to maintain a service for these old people out there, which is why we try to keep our prices to a minimum, as little as we can, but we are still an organisation that's got, at the end of the day, has got to keep running to maintain the services that we are providing. And yes, funding is a problem, unfortunately, and we do look at seeking funding from whatever area we can.
Right, anybody else at the moment? No. I mean, that was one of my questions as well, about being standalone, because as you know, some of you know, I'm on the YMCA, and each YMCA is independent of the national organisation, so it's self-funded, has to get its own grants and things like that. And so essentially what you're saying, because Age UK is a national organisation, you don't get any direct funding so it's not distributed to each individual unit?
Each Age UK or Age Concern is an autonomous unit on its own. The funding that's received from the Age UK shops or wherever, it goes into the central pot for Age UK, which actually gives us back office support. They don't actually give any direct funding support to independent organisations.
Okay, and my other question is, if members are interested on the outside body vacancies, how often do you meet? Are they very, 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 very long meetings where you think, oh crumbs, it's 10 o'clock now, aren't we going home yet? Or are they sort of like civil meetings?
Unfortunately, very, very onerous, Mr. Chairman. And we meet once a month at 8:30 in the morning, and it's finished by 12 o'clock. And we deal with all our business then.
It's good. It's good to hear about daytime meetings. Thank you. Any questions for anybody else? No? Well, thank you very, very much for coming along, and I've certainly learnt a lot tonight as well. I guessed, and Councillor Yates used to be on it, didn't he, for a very long time, and he was used to tell me about bits and pieces of what you're up to. But yeah. But no, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can get some more people interested. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 13 now, local nature reserves, the feasibility study. Before we start this, I didn't do it at the beginning, but just so everybody's aware, I'm a trustee of Hale Park Nature Reserve and I'm a director of Hale Park Nature Reserve, but it is on my DPI form anyway, so everyone's aware. So over to Deanne Cunningham for your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. At the meeting of HCL Committee in October last year, members considered a report on the general requirements for the making of local nature reserves. The report also set out a list of sites identified in the member survey that was carried out in September last year. At that meeting, it was resolved that a more detailed evaluation and feasibility assessment of potential LNR sites be carried out, and there were 38 sites on the original list. The process for making a local nature reserve is actually set out in the report, so I'm not covering it again now. The actual brief for the feasibility study was to consider all of the sites, all 38, in relation to various criteria, covering any current designations, whether the site's likely to fulfil the criteria for the making of a local nature reserve, and if not, why not, ownership and whether any land management agreements will need to be entered into, the status of any management plans and whether they're appropriate and approved, the status of any management group or friends group, and where the criteria can be met, an assessment of the time and resource implications. And that was leading to a list of potential sites ranked by which are likely to be the quickest and least resource intensive to bring forward. The final report on LNR feasibility has been produced and is appended to this report in two parts. There's a main report which summarises everything, and the supporting documents with a full evaluation of the sites. The reasons why some sites aren't likely to come forward in the short term include those with multiple land ownership issues, sites which are outside or straddling borough boundary lines, active development sites. They're initially likely to be subject to a change of ownership, but in the long term will probably achieve approved management plans and are also likely to attract funding through Section 106 agreements. Sites that are too small, i.e. less than 2 hectares, and lacking the necessary local interest to meet other LNR criteria, and remote sites with no public access. The proposed list in terms of ranking is as follows. At the top of that list is Fant Wildlife Area, followed by Hale Park Nature Reserve, Cuckoo Wood, Wimpy Field, Allington Millennium Green, High Level Bridge and Weavering Heath. Accepting the recommendations, excuse my voice, would demand new spending amounting to a one-off spend of around £8,000 per site and ongoing funding for staffing resources. Historically, declaration of LNRs on council-owned park sites has been the responsibility of the Parks and Open Spaces manager, and some of their sites are in long-term lease agreements where trustees have full autonomy and the land is community managed. In terms of private sites on private land, I've been responsible for bringing those forward in the past. Ongoing costs are likely to be around £500 per year per site, with any enforcement costs being in addition to this. The responsibility for enforcing bylaws, if they're put in place, will either be with the community protection or planning enforcement teams. The above costs don't include implementation of a management plan, which it's assumed will be able to be grant funded and implemented by volunteer groups. However, there are no guarantees of grant funding for new tools and insurance costs or training. There is clearly also a long-term financial and staffing burden on the council arising from the making of each new LNR, and this obligation will clearly increase if there's a need to impose bylaws. And this burden will extend for periods of up to and beyond 21 years, which is the standard of the agreements for each site. There's currently no funding and no officer capacity to accommodate either the making of new LNRs or the ongoing commitment. Any proposal for new funding for the proposed programme would have to be considered by this committee and then P&R committee as part of the annual budget process. Therefore, the recommendation arising from this report is that P&R committee is asked to consider funding and resources for new LNR sites so that an agreed programme can be brought forward. In terms of the programme for LNRs, it's proposed that Fant Wildlife Area is considered as the first site to bring forward, as it currently has no constraints and appears to be the most expedient and cost-effective site on the list as it stands at the moment. In parallel with this, it would be really helpful where new or revisions to existing management plans are being commissioned for council-owned park sites, sites which are otherwise compatible with LNR criteria, that they should meet the objectives for LNR so that these sites can be fast-tracked. And this includes Weavering Heath, River Len Reserve at Downswood, Senacre Wood, Bell Lane Nature Area, 5 Acre and Wentz Wood. Weavering Heath is at the bottom of the sort of initial ranking list, but it still needs an up-to-date management plan, which is why it's on this list as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very comprehensive report. I mean, I know it's taken a bit of time, and I know you've been under it with it sort of thing, getting it together, and thank you very much. And there's a lot of detail in there, and the evidence and everything like that we've got to consider. I've got Councillor Atkinson, a visiting member, first, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I should start by saying I'm actually chair of Fant Wildlife Group, so I'm very pleased to see this report. I mean, obviously I can't add much to what Mrs Cunningham's just said, and it's a very comprehensive report. I mean, the bit about Fant Wildlife starts on page 118 of your agenda, but really I just want to sit here and reinforce what's been said. So we've got a management plan. Okay, it was initially done by Hadlow College, and now we review it at every meeting we have, and we meet about 8 times a year, so it's constantly being updated, so we've got that in place. We have monthly activity sessions. We had one last Saturday, and being Christmas, we've got a tree dressing ceremony we have every year, which has sort of revived an ancient tradition, and we had mulled wine and stuff like that. Councillor Rose was there. She enjoyed it as well, so that was good. Every year we have the Medway Valley Conservation Partnership come along, and they do a lot of the really heavy work, so because we're all volunteers, so we need them to do that sort of thing, like do heavy work, clear the pond out, things like that. So that keeps it in good order. We engage with the community by having an annual barbecue in June every year. We have nature spotting events several times a year, which involves wildflowers or mammals and insects, things like that. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we planted a wildflower meadow with 48 different species of wildflower, which has made a big difference to that part of the site. Oh yeah, we get involved with local schools. We've even got the Jubilee School to come along this year, and they brought, I think they're 6 and 7 years old, and they had a great time there. Don't think they learned much about nature, but they had good fun anyway. The species there, over 50 different species of birds have been identified, so there's all sorts of things there. I won't bore you with all the details of all the plants and trees and such like, but whenever anything dies, we replace them with native species. So I think the report does speak for itself, but I just wanted to come here and reinforce and express our gratitude that we're actually top of the list. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Joy first, please.
On page 16, where it's got the proposed priority list, Moat Park was on there, but you didn't read that one out. Was that just did you just miss it out, or was there a reason? Thank you.
It's just that Moat Park is further down the list. I only read those that are ranked towards the top of the list. It is on there. I can tell you where it is on there.
What are you looking at? What page are you looking at? 16, right. Okay.
Sorry, I'm confusing myself now. Yes, sorry, Moat Park is number 4 on that list. Did I not read it out in my... I apologise for that. Yeah, it is there. Sorry.
Is that Councillor Joy? Is there anything else? Yep, thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Burton next.
Thank you, Chairman. This, to my mind, at this stage of the decision-making process, is incredibly straightforward. What we're being asked for is a recommendation for P&R to do the further exploratory work into funding. That, to my mind, is the more difficult part of this. But I would struggle to believe that there is anybody in this room who does not, in principle, support what we are talking about here. But in sort of looking towards that next stage of the process, I wonder if I might break with convention a little bit and actually ask a question of Councillor Atkinson because of his experience in this. Or because of his experience with a wildlife area. We've already heard about one organisation that relies heavily on volunteer efforts this evening, and Councillor Mrs Joy also mentioned about them being the lifeblood of any such organisation. With a view to talking about the funding and resources that this might take, does FANT struggle for volunteer assistance?
Well, not really, no. I mean, as I say, we had the activity session on Saturday. I couldn't tell you how many were there. I don't know. There was 8 or 9 or 10 people there anyway. I mean, usually there's only 4 or 5, but that's enough because we do it every month, and some of us go down there when it's not an activity session and do things off our own back. So that's fine. And as I say, every year the Medway Valley people come along, and they came, I think it was last month, that's right, and they brought at least 20 people with them. It might have been 25. So they did a huge amount of work. So all the heavy work and the pond clearing, so they got waders because we would just drown if we tried to do it. But they bring their waders along, and so they clear out all the pond weed and the bulrushes and all that stuff. So every year we get that done for us. So we've actually got enough volunteers who come along on a regular basis to keep it ticking over. So, and as I said before, we've got our management plan. I mean, one of the costs of setting up nature reserves is the management plan, well, we've got one in force already, so that cost won't apply. And there's something in here also, which I should have mentioned before, something about bylaws. I'm not sure that we need to have bylaws there because it's owned by Maidstone Borough Council anyway, so that cuts that cost out. So I honestly think the cost of making Fant Wildlife Group into a nature reserve is probably simply the cost of advertising the local press. But to answer your original question, no problem getting volunteers.
Thank you very much for that. Very, very useful. As I've said initially, I think this part of the decision-making process is relatively straightforward. So at this point, I'd like to propose both recommendations per the papers.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Kimmins? Thank you. Sorry? Yep, okay, I beg your pardon. Yeah. I'm talking about volunteers and that. What we've done at Hale Park Nature Reserve, if it's any help, we have an advantage there as we have a barn with a loo, a storage shed and a kettle, etc., etc. So we have, I mean, it's fantastic recently. We have Saturday mornings, we invite local children around, put the word out, Facebook, etc. And we get quite a number of people turning up with mum and dad and things like that. We do fungus walks, bat walks, and involving people like that, sort of like a recreational type of thing, it has increased our numbers. And I went on a bat walk a couple of months ago now, but there was probably, we had to make sure that everybody's got high vis on, torches and things like that. But we had something in 40 or 50 people doing a bat walk. And it's unbelievable, and they go and tell other people, etc. So, you know, it's really encouraging to, but you have to sort of like offer that carrot, if you know what I mean, and get people involved. Mrs. Young.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to add to this. I think it's an absolutely wonderful report, and it's something that I think we all really embrace. And it sits really well with climate change and the biodiversity, which the council is promoting at the moment, and hopefully we will be able to reach our goal for reduction in carbon emissions, etc. So this is something that I think is vitally important and that must be funded. That is, as my colleague said, is going to be the big issue, is how do we fund this? But the funding must be put in place, and it must be ongoing, something that perhaps can be put into statute. I don't know how you actually make sure that you've got the funding for the next 20 years to continue this programme, but I think that really is vitally important.
Thank you. Mr. Connell's got something to say. I was wondering if he's brought his chequebook along with him tonight, but...
Yeah, in terms of funding, just an idea that I've started to explore with my colleague Mark Green, Finance Director, is in terms of the business rates retention pilot, there have been various projects that have been allocated monies, and some of those will come in under spent, so there could be sort of a further sort of opportunity to bid for some of those monies. So I think in terms of those start-up costs that were detailed, you know, perhaps sort of focusing on 2 or 3 of those in the first instance might be a strong idea, and then, you know, working again with Mark on the policy and resources side to get the revenue, the longer term sort of funding in place to the base budget as well. But that was probably a more manageable approach that I'll start to explore now.
Lovely. Thank you. That's very good to hear. I've got, but sorry, I've just thought of something, if I may. The biodiversity report that we deferred before for a workshop, I've got a meeting with officers on Thursday to kick that into a date now, and that should be in January, sort of thing. So, but I've got Councillor Rose next.
Thank you. It's a bit like we planned it. We've had, it looks like my mind works in a similar way to my colleagues to my left. My question, you spoke about the initial startup costs and then the rough yearly running costs of £500, but you mentioned that there was other things that you gave examples of that would be potential costs on top of that. Do you have any idea as to what the costs of those different additional elements might be? just to give us a rough example of what in addition to the £500 per year, the sort of running cost would be.
Yes, I think in the main it would be in relation to if bylaws are required on the site, and as has been said, then they won't necessarily be needed on every site. But there is obviously a legal cost in drafting and bringing in the bylaws, and then it's the potential costs in terms of enforcement. So those are the issues, but they won't apply to every site.
So just to come back on that then, would it be pertinent perhaps for whichever parts of the enforcement that might be required to enforce the said bylaws, would they have like cross-cutting, would there be cross-cutting issues with those enforcement parts of MBC?
Do you want to come back?
Well, this is something we need to look into, because I haven't looked into the detail of that yet, but that's something that we would certainly need to investigate further.
When we were looking at Hale Park regarding bylaws and do's and don'ts and that, I think after an hour-long meeting we came up with about 15 to 20 actual drones and fires and barbecues and everything like that, and it got quite a comprehensive. Then we decided that we'd have to put notices up. We would have notices everywhere, if you know what I mean. So it is this, it's a... Yeah, true. Right, I've got Councillor Pearl next, please.
I was very pleased, I was very pleased with the report as a whole, actually. But I was going through it, I was very pleased to read that the Allington Millennium Green is included in the list, because obviously, contrary to popular belief, it is actually in Bridgewater and not Allington, as I'm always keen to point out. And also the high-level bridge, in that, although it's just over the border and is the one that Councillor Harwood personally looks after and sort of goes down and hugs the animals and things like that. It's the main route into town from our ward, and people will be familiar with me ranting about that bridge and the sort of general state of it, and obviously having the nature reserve there is a very positive. The one I was going to raise a query though, in terms of, was the Buckland Hill Pocket Nature Reserve, which I must confess is about sort of 50 yards up the hill from me. And I'm just curious as to understand why it's not made the cut. I can see this sort of in constraints, this is line, there is an up-to-date plan, but management needs to be implemented in line with plan. I didn't quite sort of, that's page 38 of the papers. I didn't quite understand that.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the information here on that one. Right, there, in terms of the landowner, oh no, that's something else. Yeah, that there is. It's just more detail is required in terms of the management plan, and for the costings and funding of that, I think, is the issue on that. There's a question over the small size of the site, and that access might have a detrimental effect on its nature conservation interest. So there's a few sort of issues, which is why it's not towards the top of the list, because anything with more constraints to it is ranked lower than obviously those that can be brought forward more easily.
Okay, have you finished, Councillor Pearl? Is that okay? Yeah, thank you very much. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Just to say that I am actually a trustee for Fent Wildlife Park, and just to bring out a few details that Councillor Atkinson hasn't brought out. Just to say that the Wildlife Park is situated in an area which is could be considered possibly the most serious social deprivation area in the whole of Maidstone Borough, being at the bottom half of Roseholm in Fant, and the housing there, it leaves much to be desired. So it would be very encouraging to feel that the people that are living in what would be described as substandard housing do actually have access very close to a wildlife park where they can go and really breathe fresh air in that kind of situation of housing deprivation. I'd also like to say that on page 13 of the report, the wildlife park fits with the planning situations and obligations as far as safe and clean and home and community and travel and thriving places. It's also very much within the cost-cutting section, which is health, deprivation and inequality. And as I say, placed in the area that the wildlife park is, there is inequality and deprivation. On page 14, it mentions the positive impact of health and community. And as I say, I believe that the wildlife park will be able to make a positive contribution to the health of all people in Fant, but especially in that particular area, so that health and the people of the area. Page 16, items 3.2, the committee agrees that the proposed priority list for progress to LNR sites so that they can start being brought forward as funding allows. And I believe that Fant Wildlife Area really deserves that. And also point 3.3, committee approves that Fant Wildlife Area is an LNR, so the declaration process can progress as soon as the resources are identified, which means that actually Maidstone Borough does actually own the area that Fant Wildlife Park is on, and has the opportunity to make a real improvement to the people's lives in that area. So I commend the priority of Fant Wildlife Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to say anything? If I could just say a little bit about Hale Park, because I have to. It's one of my baby. The woodland at Mount Ararat has yet to be transferred over to the Hale Park Nature Reserve, although we've been trying to get it done. I think we're into year 5 now for land transfer, although it was all tentatively agreed. We still haven't there yet. And tomorrow, our chairman is actually meeting with the author of this report to do the management plan. Tomorrow. So I'm just saying that that's why you've just beaten us, Councillor Atkinson, to the top of the Premier League. But so that's the situation. So if that could be noted, please. And essentially, Mount Ararat is a very small area of woodland, mainly sycamore, and the residents have to cut down from the back of their houses at Woodbridge Drive at the back there, and we can go in there and manage it, but unfortunately, because we're a trust, we have to agree costs and the management plan to go ahead, so these things take time. But thank you. If there isn't anybody else, so that was proposed as per the papers by Councillor Burton and seconded by Councillor Kimmins. Those in favour? And that is unanimous. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And next we go on to item, and thank you, Deanne, for your help and your hard work. Item 14. We go to Tracy now. Tracy Beattie, please, for the discretionary environmental health service charging, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really want to introduce this because I presume you've all read the report, just to emphasise that these are discretionary charges, and it's a discretionary service that I'm just talking about here, that the advice and education part of our regulatory functions would still fall outside these charges. I think that under Table 2, I have estimated how much income we would generate. It is quite modest. I don't think that we are going to save the financial situation of the local authority by adopting this. But I think it is about trying to set a direction of travel, identifying sort of where we can make or cover our costs, and also just highlight that we have we aren't the first people to actually adopt these charges in Kent. Other local authorities have already beaten this path down, and I know that it's not necessarily going to sort of change the world. Particularly something that sort of has been raised to me sort of is on charges for contaminated land. I just want to emphasise that we have already, we carry out land charge services and environmental information charges, which is at a very modest level of £25 per hour. That is set by advice from legal based on a judicial review that was carried out in 2015, I believe. The enhanced service would be in addition to anything that we were asked to provide for that service. So thank you, and if you have questions, I can try and answer.
Okay, thank you. Can't see any hands up. Anybody? Councillor Rose? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Rose, can I stop you there? I'm sorry. Councillor Joy. No, sure. Councillor Joy, would you like to go next?
Look, it's Christmas. Yes. You said about the proposed discretionary charges that are happening in other boroughs, Canterbury, Dartford, Sevenoaks, and many London authorities. Can you tell me how long they've been charging? I couldn't see anything in the report.
I can only, but Tunbridge and Morling, I think 2 years, and Sevenoaks and Dartford are about the same. Yeah. Yeah.
Councillor Rose, would you like to go now?
Yes, thank you, Chairs. You were first. Just on the contaminated land searches. It's been a long week already. So we've got £400 for both years. And I'm just, obviously we had a 200-page report before this one, so I may have skimmed this one a little bit. But you're saying, so at the moment you charge a discretionary £25 per hour based on contaminated land searches. So you've done you did the same amount both years. Is that right? How'd that sort of come about?
I appreciate where you're coming from, and I did check twice, and it is just a fluke that it's £400. It isn't, I don't know, it's just one of those things. But I did get the accountants to actually double check on that. Yes, I mean, that would be quite a sort of a modest amount of income. I did actually also look at the number of contaminated land inquiries or reports that come in, so that's not all that would attract that. This is more than would attract payment for, and that came to 19 last year. So that's 19 requests. of some sort that have been logged by officers as contaminated land, but only £400 was actually sort of drawn into the service for Maidstone. And yes, it's really weird. The amount is the same.
Just, I did pick up on it because of that, but I'm sure, as you say, it is above board. Just seems, obviously, that's 16 contaminated land searches then by my maths, 25 into 400. It just seems a little bit low to me, I guess, for a whole year. Is it? Am I off base, do you think, or what do you reckon?
Well, I haven't got an answer as to why it's such a low figure, but well, I think the charges are actually attracted to those where there's a sale or some sort of contract of happening. So people want to know what is the history of the site. So one I looked at today was Mill Cottage, Tuttersham Farm, West Farley. There was a report produced for that, and that's very much of the standard that we were talking about, sort of getting additional charges for. But it could be that it's the sale of a garage, and they want to know the history of the site, whether it's got a permit, whether there's any private water supplies sort of within a certain distance of the site. It could be that lots of people don't know, or the solicitors don't ask the questions when house sales are going through. So it could be that.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at with it. That you would really think there would be, if NBC is getting that whole £25, I mean, you're saying £25 per hour on the, so that, it just seems like a really low figure to me, because if we're talking the whole of NBC's area, and you're charging £25 per hour, there's got to be more searches based on contaminated land for that. I mean, people do it for residential property. It's not just a commercial thing. So, if I'm sure the report's right, but the numbers just seem quite low to me. That's all.
We will look into it more detail.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else at all? That's fantastic. There's 3 recommendations on page 303. I'll propose it from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please, for the recommend 3? Councillor Pearl, you were first. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that closes the meeting. And happy Christmas to you all and your families. Cheers.